He sat in row 4 by the window, trying to stay out of people's way. The seat cushion felt thin. The armrest dug into his ribs when someone behind him shifted a bag. He kept his hands folded and his eyes down. He preferred when no one noticed him. The small commuter plane smelled like wet coats and stale coffee. Outside, rain streaked across the oval window, turning the runway lights into short, broken lines. He was used to waiting. He had waited for buses, soup lines, and clinic doors. This flight was different. It had times printed on the boarding pass and a gate on the screen. If he followed instructions, he would be where the piece of paper said he should be. That promise felt strange, so he didn't think about it. He looked at the watch on his wrist. The crystal was scratched and the band worn. It still kept time. A girl in the aisle seat fiddled with a cheap pair of on-ear headphones. She had a backpack with patches sewn on the straps. A flight attendant paused by their row and asked if they were comfortable. The attendant had calm eyes and a practical tone. She checked the latches on the overhead bin and the seat belts across the row. The girl nodded and smiled, then glanced at the man by the window. He nodded back, brief and neutral. The engine started with a low growl that became a steady hum. The propeller blurred. The cabin shook a little. He knew the difference between normal vibration and a problem, and this felt normal. He counted the sounds he expected, the click of the flaps moving, the change in pitch when the power increased, the roll onto the taxiway, the brief pause at the hold short line. He did not want to be the kind of man who noticed these details, but he was. The pilot made an announcement. The voice sounded older than he expected, measured and confident. Weather ahead was choppy, but their route would thread between two heavy cells, and they had plenty of fuel. The flight would be about 50 minutes. The attendant repeated the key points. The girl put her headphones on and pulled out a paperback. The man by the window watched the wipers sweep the windshield in short, fur marks. He let the sound of the engine settle him. They accelerated down the runway. The nose lifted, the wheels thumped over the last grooves in the concrete, and the ground let go. The city pulled away in layers hangars, service roads, a line of cars with their headlights on. The plane climbed into gray. Turbulence hit at 300 feet, soft at first, then a harder jolt. Several heads snapped up. The seatbelt sign blinked. The attendant walked quickly, checking if bags had shifted. A baby started crying. The man by the window reached for nothing and kept both hands still. He closed his eyes and pictured a simple rule: power, attitude, trim. He was not in the front. He had no responsibility and no right to think about what the pilot was doing. He reminded himself of that and opened his eyes again. The wingtip strobes flickered against the clouds. Rain hammered the fuselage with a sharp, even beat dot at 2,000 feet. The ride smoothed for a minute. The cabin exhaled. A man across the aisle took out a tablet and started reading a financial report with green bars and red arrows. A couple in Rhoda whispered about connecting rides. The girl next to him set her book on her lap and stared at the safety card like it might hide a quiz. She noticed him looking and tilted it so he could see. He shook his head. He already knew the drawing of the exits and the diagram of the life vest. The first sign that something was wrong came as a subtle change in the engine's note. Not a failure, not a skip, just a climb settling into cruise with an extra moment of uncertainty. He waited to see if the sound returned to baseline. It did. He told himself not to overread it. He was out of practice. People who were out of practice invented problems. 15 minutes into the flight, the plane jolted harder. The nose yawed left, then came back. An oxygen mask compartment rattled. The attendant's intercom clicked on, but there was no voice for 2 seconds. When she spoke, the words were calm and plain. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We're experiencing some turbulence." The man by the window watched the cockpit door. The small sign above it showed a red bar. It stayed closed. He counted 3 breaths, then 30. The red bar did not change. He looked away and told himself that a closed door meant the crew was focused and busy. The plane dropped suddenly, not far, but fast enough that his stomach rose. Several passengers gasped. A plastic cup bounced off the floor and rolled down the aisle. The girl caught it with her shoe. The man across the aisle grabbed his tablet with both hands and held it like a shield. Then a different sound came through the thin door. It was not turbulence. It was a chair hitting something and a muffled shout. The attendant was at the front within seconds. Her shoulders square, her voice louder. "Sir or mum?" If anyone near the front has medical training, please press your call button. No one moved for a moment. Then a woman in row 1 raised her hand. The attendant unlocked the cockpit door, glanced inside, and turned pale. She looked back and met the man by the window's eyes for half a second, as if searching faces for specific features. She did not know what she was looking for, only that she had to look. She stepped into the cockpit and closed the door behind her. After a short pause, the intercom clicked again. Is anyone on board a pilot? Or has anyone had flight training? Silence stretched. People looked at each other, waiting for someone else to speak. The man by the window felt his heart start to pound. He did not want to stand. He did not want to raise his hand and be judged by his shoes and jacket before he said a word. He did not want to be wrong about what he could still do. He waited 3 counts. No one spoke. He raised his hand halfway, and then fully. The attendant opened the door again and saw him. She came down the aisle quickly, leaning to avoid shoulders. Up close, her eyes were steady. Sir, have you flown before? Yes, he said. It's been a long time. What kind of aircraft? Single engine. Sub-multi. Instruction. He forced himself to be exact. Not current. Not recent. She nodded once. The captain is unresponsive. We have to keep this stable and talk to ATC. Can you help? He unbuckled, stood, and felt the eyes on him. A man in row 3 shook his head and muttered, You've got to be kidding. The girl in the aisle seat looked up at him with open fear and trust at the same time. He kept his face neutral and moved forward. The cockpit was small and full of familiar shapes. The yoke was where it should be. The throttle and condition levers were where they should be. The instruments were not exactly the ones he knew, but the logic was the same. The autopilot was engaged. The captain slumped to the right, his headset askew, his skin gray and damp. The medical professional from row 1 squeezed into the space behind and reached for a pulse. The attendant moved the captain's legs with care and guided him out of the seat to the small space behind the cockpit door. It was tight, but they made it work. The man slid into the left seat and pulled the headset on. He did not touch anything for the full seconds. He watched the attitude indicator, the airspeed, the vertical speed, the engine torque, and the prop RPM. He looked at the autopilot mode annunciator. Altitude hold, heading mode, stable. The GPS showed their current leg and the next fix. The CDI centered and drifted a hair, then centered again. He breathed out, steady. He pushed the transmit switch, center. Caravan November 854. We have a medical emergency. The pilot is incapacitated. I have flight experience, but I'm not current. I'm in the left seat. The controller's reply was immediate and calm. Caravan 854. Copy medical emergency. What is your current altitude and heading? He read them off. The controller asked about fuel. He checked the totalizer. Enough for the plan plus reserves. The controller asked about souls on board. He counted rows, subtracted the empty seat next to the captain, and answered. The controller's voice did not change. 854. Maintain 7,000. I'll vector you toward a field with a long runway and instrument approach. Are you comfortable with basic instrument flying and autopilot management? Yes, he said. Yes, good. I'm going to hand you 2 approach into minutes. They'll set you up for an ILS. Give a second person up there to read checklist. The attendant leaned into the doorway. I can, but I need to be in the cabin too. The girl from row 4 was there, standing behind the curtain. The attendant hesitated. The girl raised her hand. I know checklist, the girl said. My dad taught me on a simulator. I can read. The man looked at the attendant. The attendant made a quick choice. Okay, she said to the girl. You can sit in the right seat and read. Do not touch anything unless he tells you to. Understood? Yes, the girl said. They squeezed into place, the girl careful with her knees. She strapped in. Her hands trembled, then steadied when they found the laminated checklist in the side pocket. She looked to the man for a nod before she spoke. He nodded. Approach checklist? She asked. Stand by, he said. Let's get the vectors first. Approach came on frequency. The controller's tone matched the first one, calm, compact, and specific. Caravan 854. Turn right heading 180. Expect the ILS runway to 7 at Hamilton. Weather there is light to moderate rain, ceiling 800, visibility 3 miles. Winds to 30 at 12. Gust to 20. Are you set up for an AV1 ILS? He scanned the panel. The avionics suite was modernized. The ILS frequency and course could be set on the primary nav source with a few button presses. But he didn't want to dig for menus and fumble. He knew the architecture well enough. He asked, "Can you give me vectors to final and we'll go raw data on the localizer and glide slope? I'll keep the autopilot in heading and altitude until established." A firm approach said, "Turn right heading to 10. Maintain 7,000. Say Soul's on board again." He answered. The controller acknowledged and continued with small, manageable steps. The man kept the airplane straight and level. He monitored torque, ITT, and prop RPM. He adjusted trim. He kept his right hand off the yoke and used small inputs with his left when needed. The autopilot held the big picture. He watched the little picture. The medical professional in the doorway spoke in a low voice to the attendant. "Pulse is weak. Breathing shallow. We need EMS on landing." The attendant relayed that on the intercom without drama. People listened. The man across the aisle put his tablet away and pressed his palms together hard. The cabin quieted except for the baby, who fussed and then went quiet, worn out. The girl took a breath. "Checklist." She asked again. "Go," he said. She read each item out loud. He answered or asked her to skip if it was already covered by the autopilot or not applicable. She read clearly. The man focused on the next step and the next instruction. He did not allow his mind to drift to what might happen if he messed up. He kept the scope small. 854, approach said. Descend and maintain 5,000. Turn right heading to 30. 5,000 to 30, the man repeated. He set the new altitude on the mode control and pressed the vertical speed knob. To start a manageable descent, he checked power and trim. The airframe shuddered lightly in rain. The petard heat was already on. He verified it. He watched for ice on the wiper arms and the windscreen frame. None yet, but the temp outside hovered near freezing. He did not like that. He made a decision. Approach, we're close to the freezing level. Request a lower altitude sooner if possible to get warmer air. Approved. The controller said without delay. Descend and maintain for 1,000. For 1,000, he said, and adjusted. The engine numbers stayed in the green. He kept the descent shallow and steady. He did not want to chase altitudes. The man who had muttered earlier stepped into the aisle and pointed. The attendant intercepted him. "Sit down, sir," she said. "Now, that man can't fly a plane," the man said. "Look at him." The attendant lowered her voice. "He's the best chance you have. Sit down or I'll have to restrain you." The man sat, muttering again, but softer this time. The cabin noticed the exchange and then returned to holding still. The girl in the right seat swallowed, then resumed reading the next item. The man in the left seat kept his eyes on the instruments. Approach gave them another turn. The vectors made a clean arc to the localizer intercept. The man tuned the ILS frequency. The needle came alive, drifting in from the left. He armed approach mode. The autopilot tracked the heading until the localizer was close. It captured gently and started to turn. 854, you're 5 from the marker. The controller said. Descend to 3,000. Maintain 180 knots to the marker. Then your discretion. Glide slope is alive. 3,000, the man repeated. He adjusted. He watched the glide slope diamond slide down toward center. He set flaps 1 notch at the girl's call. The plane ballooned a little, then settled. He trimmed again. He kept one eye on torque, ready to counter the drag. He did not raise his voice when he spoke to the girl. When I call for it, set flaps to approach. Then, on glide slope, gear down, he caught himself. This airplane didn't have retractable gear. He corrected. Scratch that. Flaps approach on my call, then flaps landing later. Read me target speeds. She scanned the card printed for this model and read out the suggested approach numbers. He adjusted his mental picture and nodded. He asked her to set the missed approach altitude on the window in case they had to go around. She did. Careful with each turn of the knob. The cabin felt smaller. Rain deepened. The wind gusted, pushing the localizer needle half a dot left, then back to center. The autopilot did its job. He tightened his scan. He did not look outside. There was nothing useful to see yet. 854. Contact tower now, approach said. Good luck. Tower, 854 on the ILS to 7, he said. Caravan 854. Winds to 30 at 15. Gust to 1. You are cleared to land runway to 7. Emergency cruiser standing by. Clear to land, he said, and let the words settle him. Clear to land meant someone expected them to finish this. The girl read the final pre-landing items. The attendant stood behind the curtain and watched without speaking. The medical professional kept a hand on the captain's wrist and murmured numbers. That meant little to anyone else. The man glanced once at the engine instruments again. Everything held. Tower came back with a suggestion. 854. We can give you the rabbit lights at full intensity. Would you like that? Yes, he said. Thank you. He let the autopilot fly the glide slope down through 2,500 feet. When the altimeter passed 2,000, he put his right hand on the yoke and his left on the power lever. He took control, clicked off the autopilot, and felt the airplane's weight shift from the servos to him. It was a familiar change. It required no guesswork. He trimmed. The yoke fell firm and steady. Flaps approach, he said. The girl moved the lever to the next notch and confirmed the setting out loud. The plane sank a bit faster. He added a little power. The glide slope needle wavered and then steadied. At 1,500 feet. The man's breathing steadied into a rhythm he knew. He put his heels on the floor, toes ready for rudder. He kept the nose where it belonged and the wings level. He heard the wind hit the fuselage in uneven pulses. He made small corrections. He did not fight the gust hard. He absorbed them. The localizer needle slid a quarter. Right. He nudged left pressure. It centered. The glide path wanted a hair more power to stay alive. He gave it. The speed settled on his target. The girl read the last items again like a mantra. He answered each one, never taking his eyes off the panel for more than half a heartbeat. Minimums will be 700, Tower said. Report runway in sight. Roger, he said. The attendant moved through the cabin one last time, checking belts, making eye contact with anyone who needed it. The man from row 3 kept his eyes closed. The couple in row 2 held hands. The baby slept, worn out by earlier tears. Wind shifting to 2-0, Tower said. Gusts decreasing slightly. Copy, the man said. He took a single, quick glance outside and saw only gray and faint shapes. He returned to the instruments. He kept the needles together. He let the airplane ride the path he had chosen, not the one the gust suggested. At 900 feet, the noise of rain changed. It softened a little, as if the drops were larger and farther apart. The altimeter unwound. The glide slope needle held center. He thought of nothing except the next small input. Flaps landing, he said. The girl moved the lever to full. The plane responded with more drag and a stronger desire to sink. He added power and trimmed. The speed slipped, and then returned to target. The vertical speed steadied. 854, Tower said. You are looking good from our end. Continue. Continuing, he said. The controller's voice had no visible effect on the needles, but it helped anyway. He kept the yoke pressure steady and light. He did not grip it hard. He let his fingertips feel the small changes. The cabin waited. The man across the aisle opened his eyes and looked forward without speaking. The attendant placed a hand on the back of the right seat and stayed there, out of the way. Approach lights in sight, the man said suddenly. The gray outside shifted. White points appeared, far and aligned. He kept his eyes on the instruments for 2 beats after that, then glanced outside again. The rabbit lights stretched ahead like a short road in the rain. He held the glide path. He touched the rudder to correct for the crosswinds nudge. Runway in sight, he said. Caravan 854, clear to land, Tower repeated, firm. Wind to 30 at 12. He was already configured. He was already committed. He rode the needles and the visual together. He did not flare in his mind. He did not imagine the touchdown. He kept the airplane flying. At 600 feet, the runway edges came into view. At 500, the centerline lights were clear enough to use. He fixed the sight picture in place. Set missed approach altitude checked. The girl said reflexively, checked, he said. He appreciated the discipline. At 400 feet, the rain eased another notch. The wind pushed right again. He stepped on the rudder and kept the nose aligned. He felt the aileron response and kept the wings level. The monitor in the cabin beeped as the medical professional checked the captain's vitals again. The numbers wouldn't change anything. He had to do now. He kept flying. At 300 feet, he made a small power change and trimmed a click. He did not let himself celebrate that the hardest part was almost over. He kept the picture steady. He planned the flare he would need for the airplane's weight, the wet runway, and the crosswind. He planned the beta range for prop braking on rollout. He did not move his hands yet. At 200 feet, Tower spoke again. Emergency vehicles are staged at the far taxiway. After landing, you can roll long. Do not stop on the runway unless you need to. We'll have someone meet you on the ramp. Understood, he said. The girl's breathing was audible now. Quick and shallow. She still held the checklist. She kept quiet. The attendant tightened her jaw and watched the window. At 100 feet, the glide path was still centered. The localizer stayed inside half a dot. The speed held. He kept the nose level and the descent steady. The airplane felt honest. He did not ask it for anything it could not give. He crossed the threshold. He had one more decision to make, and he would make it on the next breath. He crossed the threshold and held the picture. The wind nudged right again. He added a small left aileron and a touch of right rudder to keep the nose aligned with the center line. He didn't chase the drift. He corrected and waited half a beat to see the result. At 10 feet, he brought the power back, raised the nose a degree, and let the sink rate ease. The mains touched first, firm but straight. The airplane wanted to weather vane. He stayed on the rudder and kept aileron into the wind. The nose wheel came down. He brought the power lever into beta and felt the prop bite the air. Spray fan out on both sides. Speed's good, the girl said, watching the tape. Her voice shook, but she was steady. Stay with me, he said. We're fine. They rolled. He held centerline through the first 1,000 feet. The emergency trucks waited at the far taxiway, lights flashing. Tower cleared them to roll long. He kept beta until the speed dropped, then came back to idle and used light braking. The airplane tracked true. When they reached a safe taxi speed, he eased off the brakes and steered toward the centerline lights. He exhaled once, short. Welcome to Hamilton, Tower said. Exit at the end when able. Emergency vehicles will follow. Roger, he said. At the far taxiway, he turned carefully, keeping aileron into the wind. He stopped past the hold short lines at the parking brake and brought the condition lever toward low idle. He let the prop settle. He shut off the landing lights and strobes and left the beacon on. The attendant moved to the cockpit door. Are we secure? We're stopped, he said. Engines are stable. Let's keep everyone seated until the medical team is on board. She nodded and went on the PA. Her tone was calm. Passengers stayed put. The man in row 3 had tears on his face and stared at the floor. The couple in row 2 held hands and whispered. The baby slept on his shoulder. The medical team came up the stairs with a stretcher and equipment bags. The medical professional from row 1 slid back to give them space. They moved the captain with practiced care. The attendant coordinated angles and straps. The girl in the right seat kept her hands in her lap and watched the checklist, like it could anchor her. The man stayed in the left seat and handled the simple things. Avionics still on. Fuel still on. Generator outputs normal. Temps and pressures and range. He didn't rush to shut down until the medical team cleared the door. When the stretcher rolled out, he pulled the condition lever to cut off. The prop wound down. The cabin grew quiet. He took off the headset. The world felt larger without it. He unbuckled and stood slowly. His knees reacted to the adrenaline leaving his system. He held the seat back for a second and then stepped into the aisle. People didn't clap. They looked at him with a different kind of focus, like they were reevaluating an image they had been sure about. The man from row 3 spoke first. I was wrong, he said, voice thin. Thank you. The man nodded once. It's okay. The girl stood by the right seat with the checklist still in her hand. She swallowed. I did okay. You did great, he said. Better than great. You read what mattered. The attendant joined them. Up close, she looked tired but steady. You flew the airplane when it needed that most. Thank you. He looked past her to the ramp. A supervisor in a reflective vest waited with 2 ground staff and a police officer. No one looked hostile. No one looked eager to arrest anyone. The supervisor lifted a hand in a short wave and waited. Do I need to stay? He asked the attendant. Let's talk to them, she said. They'll have paperwork and questions, and they'll want your name. He had a name. He also had a choice about saying it aloud to people who would write it down. He decided not to make it a big moment. He followed her down the aisle. On the ramp, the supervisor introduced himself, then the officer, then the maintenance lead. The introductions were simple. No speeches. The supervisor kept it practical. We'll debrief later, he said. Right now, EMS has the captain. You handled the aircraft. We appreciate it. Can we get your full name and some contact information? Also, would you be willing to talk to our chief pilot by phone today? Yes, he said. He gave his name and a number where he could receive text. It was a borrowed phone, but it worked. The officer took a short statement about what he had heard and seen in the cockpit. The questions were basic. Time, actions, who said what? The man answered without embellishment. The officer closed his notebook and thanked him. The supervisor glanced at the airplane. You've flown a Caravan before? Variants, he said. Instructed on similar systems years ago. The supervisor nodded. It showed. The attendant stepped closer. We'll be moving the passengers to the terminal now. Do you want a ride or anything from us? He shook his head. I'm okay. The girl came down the stairs holding her cheap headphones and the laminated card. She hesitated, then pushed the headphones toward him. For you, she said. So you'll remember I helped. He didn't take the headphones right away. She kept her arm out, face set. He accepted them. Thank you, he said. I will. A small crowd had formed behind the barrier near the terminal door. Airport staff kept them back. Some held phones. He looked away from the lenses. He didn't want to be a story someone shaped for their feed. The supervisor checked his radio, then looked back. Our chief pilot is on the line if you have 5 minutes. No pressure. I can talk, the man said. They stepped to a quiet corner of the ramp under the wing. The call was direct. The chief pilot asked 3 technical questions about how he managed the approach, then asked how current he had been before today. The man answered honestly. Would you be interested in coming by tomorrow? The chief pilot asked. I can't promise anything, but we have roles on the ground. There are ways to re-enter the system with checks and training. I can come by, he said. Good, the voice said. We'll text you a time. The call ended. The supervisor handed the phone back. You've got somewhere to stay tonight. He nodded. I'll manage. The attendant returned from the terminal door. Passengers are inside. A few left notes with me. For you? She held out a small bundle, a folded jacket, a grocery store gift card. A note that said simply, thank you for flying us home. He didn't try to answer that. He took the items and kept them close. A light rain still fell, softer now. The trucks idled by the fence. The airplane sat quiet with the beacon off. The ramp smelled like wet asphalt and warm oil. He looked at the watch on his wrist. It still kept time. He turned toward the terminal. He had to check on the captain's status, give one more statement, and find a ride. After that, there was a phone call tomorrow and a place to show up. He didn't know what it would become. He didn't need to solve it today. He started walking. The headphones hung around his neck, light and cheap and important. The note was in his pocket. The center line on the ramp led straight ahead. He followed it.